Welcome everyone, I'm Sherry and this is Goodknits. On today's knitting podcast, it is going to be just a traditional podcast episode. I have 3 whips to share with you, no finished objects, no acquisition, so I think we're going to get through this quite quickly. I have some updates on my Stromboli tee. My Micaela sweater has seen a ton of progress, and I actually have a brand new whip to share with you, which hasn't been featured much even on Instagram yet. So hopefully that will be completely new to most of you. So for those that are brand new here, I'm a Canadian expat originally from Calgary, Alberta, and I have been living in Amsterdam for the last 7 years with my husband. This is actually, it was probably more last episode, but this is basically my 1-year anniversary. I realized August 21st was when I posted my first video here on YouTube, completely on a whim. Ended up doing much better than I expected it would, and so I stuck with it, and now here we are a year later. I really enjoyed creating this space here on YouTube because it has really opened up so many conversations for me and helped me meet many knitters from around the world, which I don't think I would have had the opportunity to do without this channel. So I never really thought that when I started this I would actually still be here a year later, or that anybody would really be following along, but here we are. I'm almost at 5,000 subscribers, which is just mind-blowing to me that so many of you seem to care what I have to say about knitting. So thank you for everyone that's been here since the beginning and anybody that's joined recently. Since there's been quite a lot of people that have just recently started following, I thought I would do a little bit of an intro for, I guess, maybe more my knitting style, so you know what to expect if you haven't been here for a while. If you have been, you can go ahead and just skip past this and get straight into the whip content. So I kind of started dabbling again in knitting in 2017. I went home at Christmas and my mom ended up showing me how to make a scarf, which I hadn't done in a while. I dabbled in knitting for a little bit, but then it was 2020 during COVID where really my interest in knitting peaked again. No surprise, I think most knitters had that, where a bunch of us ended up getting into it as a way to kill time during lockdowns. And I ended up just falling in love with it. That's when I made my first garment that actually fit. And once I figured out how to actually make clothing for myself, a whole world opened up and I became very, very interested in knitting. During that time though, I've also really discovered what my own personal style is. So here you're not going to see a lot of hand-dyed or variegated or tonal yarns. I tend to stick to solid colors. I really love the look of hand-dyed yarns when they're in the hank, but on me personally, anytime I've tried to knit with them, it's just not my personal style. I don't tend to wear a lot of really bold colors. Yeah, I don't tend to really gravitate towards things that have multiple dimensions and colors to them. So also you're not going to see a lot of color work here. I tend to stick to single color, not necessarily muted tones. I do work with some brighter colors, but they tend to fit more within my true autumn color palette. I did a color analysis in person with some stylists here in Amsterdam a few years ago, and I'm really trying in the last year or so to be much more mindful of knitting actually within my color palette, and I think that's making a big difference actually in what I enjoy about my knits and making sure that those are actually pieces that I'm going to wear. So I've also realized recently knitting with grays isn't really for me. Also blacks and whites, those colors don't tend to really suit me. So I stick more to kind of off-whites, purples, darker greens. So you're going to see a lot of those kind of colors. And now brown is also a color that I'm gravitating more towards, as that tends to suit me a bit more. I used to really knit a lot of petite knit and my favorite things knitwear, but in 2024 I decided I wanted to have a bit of a mini goal to branch out, just to experience other knitters and different pattern styles, but also as a way to help myself grow. I think it's easy to get into a bit of a comfort zone with gravitating towards pattern styles and designers that you're familiar with. You know how they write, you know what to expect. And I think knitting from other designers gives you an opportunity to learn some new techniques, also challenge yourself a bit to really see how do other people do things, how do they write about techniques. is there something new that I can learn from that process? So I've actually really been enjoying that. I've made very little my favorite things and petite knit patterns this year. They do pop up from time to time. Actually, I'm wearing my Cumulus tee that I just finished here by Petite Knit. So it's not that I never knit them, but I am trying to mindfully stay away from them. They have beautiful stuff, but I think I've also realized I like a slightly more elevated basic. There's some other designers that I'm finding like Aggio Knits, Other Loops, Vert Knit, Moreca Knits that are just doing things that I think are a bit more my style. Oh, also Suzanne Muller or Paulastrickt. There's all these kind of special details within things that I'm really gravitating towards. And so I've really been trying to explore patterns from them, but other designers as well. And that's something that I'd like to continue to do. So I do try to be a bit choosy about when I pick a petite knit pattern or my favorite things versus a new designer. You will also find here that there will probably be no socks or very minimal socks. I am not a sock knitter. I really tried. I knit one pair of socks. It had a ton of mistakes. I never wear them. I didn't really enjoy the process. Then I tried to make a DK weight pair of socks. I haven't finished them because I was getting really tired of working on magic loops. So there's just something about small circumference knitting that I don't really love. So you're not going to see a lot of sock content here. I might change my mind down the road. People are welcome to try to convince me of socks, but at the moment, in general, I don't tend to knit a lot of accessories. So you're also not going to see many, if any, shawls here. I am trying to knit the odd shawl, maybe in a more basic pattern, but for example, like a Stephen West multicolor, beautiful design. You may never see that here, but I definitely appreciate when other people are knitting them, and I love watching that content. And then finally, just in terms of knitting level, I by no means consider myself an advanced knitter. I'm very much in the intermediate category. I still have so much to learn about knitting and different techniques, and there's tons of stuff I haven't tried yet. Like I haven't done a double knit button band or pockets or like really elaborate color work. So I'm very grounded in the intermediate category. I'm still learning a lot. I make a ton of mistakes. And part of having this podcast is I really want to be able to share those mistakes with you and tell you my learnings so that hopefully that can help all of you in the future so you don't make those same ones, or also so you can give me advice. So I think that's sort of a high-level overview of me as a knitter. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, either about me personally, me as a knitter, anything else that you want to know. If there's enough questions, I might do an Ask Me Anything episode or just pepper in that content in future podcast episodes. But yeah, I'm happy to answer anything that you might be curious about. The first whip that I want to update you on today is the Stromboli tee, and this is a project I showed for the first time in the last podcast episode. It is an all-over lacework t-shirt by Caitlin Hunter, also known as Boylan Knitworks. It was recently released July 2024, so it just came out, which I didn't know when I picked it. I just happened to be trying to find a pattern that I could use this beautiful 100% linen yarn with that I bought in Lithuania. So it is by Sun Yarn Studio, also known as Saulės Siūlės in Vilnius, Lithuania. So I was just trying to find a pattern that I could knit with this. I felt like the linen was going to work very well for an all-over lace to really show the stitch definition and make the most of that yarn. So I cast it on a whim, and last episode I had done 5.5 pattern repeats of the 8 that I needed to do. I completed those, and I had just split for the back panel, so I've done 1 pattern repeat there. Before I ended up starting on the back panel, I ended up doing a mid-project block because I said in the pattern, okay, so let me take a step back. The reason that I did a project block is because I was really unsure on the length. This has worked from the bottom up, which is not my preferred method because it's very difficult to try on. And once you kind of split and start working up, it's not really something you can easily go in and change later if it happens to be too short. So I was really in doubt if this was long enough. But the pattern isn't super explicit around, okay, you finished this section, it should now be this length. It's just check the length, see how you like it. If you want to do another pattern repeat, know that this will add about 2.5 centimeters per repeat. So there is a schematic drawing within the pattern, and I checked that, and for the size it said, and I'm knitting a size 1 on this on 3.5 millimeter needles. Pattern calls for 3.25, but my gauge was off. So the pattern said well, it wasn't explicit, but it looks like from the drawing, the bottom section before the sleeve should be 23.5 centimeters. So I decided this was only 21 when I finished the pattern repeats. Because I wouldn't be able to go back and easily fix it, I would block it, stretch it out, see how it did, because my swatch couldn't really be trusted on this because I swatched on 3.25 millimeter. Then because my swatch wasn't the correct size, I just cast on the 3.5, so I don't have a gauge swatch at the correct needle size. Which I know I've been really bad about gauge swatching for pretty much all my recent projects. Even though I tell everybody else you should be gauge swatching, I don't listen to my own advice. So I blocked this and I ended up getting it to 25 centimeters, which the pattern called for 23.5, so I feel pretty confident. And this bloomed really nicely in blocking. So I'll insert a picture of how it looked pre-block, but the stitch definition, like everything just opened up. It lays so nicely flat now, and I feel confident enough to continue. Also because I only have, well, these 2 cakes and 1 more. And the other cake, the third one, is 600 meters total. Yeah, so these are each 100 grams, 600 meters, or 656 yards. So I really don't want to have to order more yarn for this top. Therefore, I need to try to make the size work. So I didn't want to add length because then I was pretty sure I would end up running out of yarn, since I am already on the cusp of maybe not having enough. And worst case, I know I can probably shorten the sleeves on this one if I need to. So I want to at least get the body done, ideally with these, which there's still quite a lot left for how far I've gotten, and then adjust the sleeves at the end. With the Stromboli tee, I said in the last episode that I was kind of prioritizing this, doing 4 to 8 stitches or rows per day. It's a pattern repeat of 8 rows because I was hoping I could get it done before the season ended so I would have a chance to wear it. I've since realized we're now into September. It's September 2nd when I'm filming this. I don't think it's very realistic that I am going to even come close to finishing this before fall really kicks in, and this is an open gauge top. It's short sleeve, so am I really going to wear this year? Let's be realistic. I am always cold. So the chance of me wearing a short sleeve open gauge shirt in fall is, not likely to happen. I think I need to be realistic and probably prioritize my other knits that I will have more of a chance to wear in the coming months. So I have decided I'm not hibernating this, but I think I'm just going to slowly work my way through it as I get an urge to work on something a bit more complicated, because it is really nice some days to just pick this up, do a few rows. I need to really think it through, especially now that I'm working flat. I need to make sure I'm reading the pattern correctly. That kind of tripped me up at first when I started. I don't think that this will be a priority for the coming months, but it is something that I will maybe continue to work on if I feel like I want something more engaging. And then the plan will be to try to have it done for next spring. I think part of the reason I don't really want to work on this too much as well is because the 2 strands of linen held together on such a small gauge, it's just, yeah, it's hard on the hands. It's really something that I can only do about 4 rows at a time. It's a little bit different now that I'm just working half a panel back and forth because it's less stitches, so I can do a little bit more in a sitting. But yeah, the linen it's tough. It's not something I'm going to be rushing to work with again. So that's the Stromboli tee. Now with kind of fall vibes hitting and I'm having this intense urge to cast on all the fall things, not a priority anymore, but really loving it. I think it's going to be a beautiful piece when it's done, and I'll keep you all posted on how that goes. I almost forgot to mention one of the most important parts from my last video with the Stromboli tee is I mentioned that I had found this lace knitting hack where I was adding all these extra stitch markers to identify how many pattern repeats I'd done, and that way I could use it as like a double check for when I needed to, or when I was finishing a section, so that if I was off somewhere I could just take back only that pattern round section and correct it there before I got to the very end. The amount of comments that I got saying you all know this hack and you've been doing it and it's a lifesaver just blew my mind, because I swear I've never heard anybody talk about it before. So is it just the world's best kept secret? I mean, designers don't mention it as a suggestion in any pattern, at least that I've come across so far. And I swear I have never heard anybody else in a podcast mention that they do that. Maybe I've missed it, but great. Everybody knows how to do that. So I did not discover any actual hack, even though I was very proud of myself. But I guess I'm proud of myself for figuring it out on my own without knowing that everybody else was doing it. Good to know that we're all doing the same thing, but it was just really funny how many comments that I got saying, oh yeah, I do that all the time, and don't forget to add lifelines, and yeah. Yeah, you think you know everything when you're knitting, and apparently not. There's always new surprises. Next whip is my Micaela sweater from Moreca Knits. Also a brand new pattern. I believe it also came out July or August 2024. And it is an all over mohair sweater, at least for me. So this was, she also calls for Cardiff Cashmere Brushlight, I believe, 1 strand. But I ended up buying this antique rose Filcolana Tilia mohair for my popo jacket, and it wasn't quite the right color, so I had 6 balls laying around that I wanted to do something with. This sweater came out. I was traveling to Munich for the Adele concert last month and really just wanted something that I could cast on quickly that was a very simple knit that I could knit in the airport on the plane. So I ended up casting this on, and honestly, I mean, it's been, when did I cast it on? August 9th, it's, yeah, September 2nd. For a few weeks, I have done all the sleeves. So the body, I don't think's really changed since the last time you saw it. No, it wouldn't have, because I was already done part of the sleeve. So I've since finished 1 sleeve and finished 2 sleeves. So this is making quick progress. I love the fact that 5mm needles work so fast. I will maybe quickly pop this on. I need to do it over this shirt though, because it's at too short of a length, so it will be very not safe for YouTube. So I still need to block this. So I've ended up knitting it to the pattern measurements for the sleeve, which called for, I think, 6 rounds of decreases. You knit to a measurement of 34 centimeters. And after the decreases, I was actually bang on at 34 centimeters, but I tried it on and it was sitting really high on my wrist. Like, I want to say it was here. So because I've had the issue in so many of my other projects where the sleeves are too short, I decided I've knit every other pattern to the sleeve length in the pattern, and they've been too short. So let's maybe add a little bit of length here. I don't expect I haven't blocked a mohair sweater in a while, but I don't expect mohair to grow a ton. And she did say in the pattern to really stretch the sleeves in blocking, which maybe indicates to get that length, you do really, really need to block it quite hard. So rather than doing that, I decided I'm just going to add 10 extra rows, which is roughly 5 centimeters. And then you go ahead and do a rib and then the double knitting to then do an Italian bind off or tubular bind off. Hopefully this isn't hitting the microphone. Apologies if it is. So yes, I did both sleeves exactly the same. I just cast this sleeve off yesterday. I am going to move on to the neckline next, which I was reading through. It's actually a completely kind of new to me construction for how she does the folded collar. So I'm quite excited to see how that works up and if that's maybe something I bring into other projects where maybe a slightly different collar is called for. And I really like how the collar on this one looks in all the pattern photos. So I want to do the neck also to just bring up this neckline and see how it's fitting. I think once I do the neck, I imagine the sleeves will actually shorten a little bit because everything will get tightened in. And then I'll see how much yarn I have left so that I can do the rest of the body. One sleeve ended up taking 35 grams, so more than like a ball of this. So this is what's left of my last 2 balls, and I did not weigh this. So I still have to do the neck and then the rest of the body with this. So even with a cropped body, I don't think I'm going to be able to squeeze the full length I need out of these remaining balls because the neckline actually takes, I think, 26 rows of, yeah, roughly 132 stitches on the neckline. So yeah, I think I'm probably gonna have to buy a bit more. It's not the worst, either one extra ball and just I'll spin up half and then hold it together, or I'll buy 2 more balls, we'll see. Thankfully the Filcolana Tilia isn't too expensive. Okay, I'm really hot sitting here in this, so I'm just gonna pop it off. In general, I just really love the saddle shoulder design of this one. So that's the shoulder detail. And then I think it's just a nice amount of positive ease. It's going to be, I think, a really wearable, beautiful sweater. I don't really have a ton extra to say about it since the last episode. It's gone really, really smoothly. The pattern is very well written. So I think other than that one thing I mentioned last time where the long tail cast on for joining the 2 front pieces wasn't clear, everything else in the pattern has been very well documented. I believe there's also a video for the neckline because you do need to add a contrast color in that setup round so that when you go to fold it down later, similar to my favorite things knitwear, cami number 9, you have that contrast color so that you can actually see where you need to do that join and pick up the first round stitches. Yeah. Also, I think just because of how clear that pattern is and how beautiful the design, it's making me really want to knit more by this designer. So I have been looking at her other patterns and I'll talk about it more in my fall knitting plans video in the next couple weeks. But I do think I'm going to go ahead and pick quite a few of hers to knit up in the future because I think her style overall just suits me and I really love when a pattern is clear. Oh, and I'm knitting this on a size small on 5mm needles. Final whip for today is a brand new one to be featured here, and that is the Freestyle Shirt by Suzanne Muller or Paulastrickt. I am knitting this in a size small on 3.5mm needles, and I am using the Kremka Soul Wool Morning Salutation in the color 14, which is this nice olive green color. So I again kind of ended up casting this on a whim because we were traveling and the mohair sweater or the Micaela sweater wasn't really at a point where I could travel with it because I was on the sleeve decreases and it wasn't quite as mindless, and it was also a slightly bigger project at that point. So I was like, well, of course I need to have a tiny project that I can carry around and just knit on the plane. So I decided I would just go ahead and cast this on. So yes, this was for my trip to London. Again, we traveled to see a concert. So we went and saw, and this is going to age me, Death Cab for Cutie and Postal Service. They were playing at All Points East Festival in Victoria Park in London. And it was the 20th anniversary of their, so for Death Cab, the Transatlanticism album, which is one of my all-time favorite albums. And for Postal Service, their one and only Give Up album, also the 20th anniversary. And I have never had an opportunity to see Postal Service in person. So I've seen Death Cab, I think 3 or 4 times now. But Postal Service has always been a dream of mine to see. It was a side project by Ben Gibbard, and I forget his name. And they put out one album and that was it. And then they got busy with their other projects. So it was just a super special moment. Jenny Lewis, who did vocals on the original album, actually was touring with them. Yeah, it was just a once in a lifetime show. There was so many elder millennials there. I think just reliving our youth. So I felt both old, but also very nostalgic and happy. So anyway, I casted on this project for that trip to London, and I ended up getting quite far. So I cast this on a week ago, and I wish this looked to be in a better state where I could show it nicely, but I am basically through all the increases now. I'm just doing 3 more rounds of body increases, and then I'll be able to split for sleeves, which I was hoping to get to before this episode, but it didn't happen. I'm at the point where I have 400 plus stitches because this is fingering weight yarn, and therefore each round is taking what feels like a lifetime to do. I did sit down Saturday, Sunday, and just kind of power through the remaining increases because I know it'll go a lot faster once I've split. I do really like how this yarn is working up. I think it holds the stitch definition really, really well. It actually has more of a heathered kind of look than I was expecting. So there's definitely some interesting layers to the color here that I didn't realize when I was just looking at it in a ball. Also, I'm going to apologize that I gave you completely wrong information in the last episode. I said that this was started very similar to the Sonia tee. So when I originally read the pattern, I just saw, oh, insert a lifeline so that later you can easily go back and pick up stitches. And for some reason, my brain instantly just latched onto that and figured, oh, it's because you have to do this purl bump before the ribbing, and therefore that must be why you need to do that, which was wrong. So there is a lifeline for the purpose of picking up the neckline later, but this is in fact a raglan shirt. So you knit it in the round, you don't need to do a back panel and then go over the shoulders and all that. So I was wrong on that. And so if you listened to me last time, ignore what I said. This is a raglan, and it's an interesting one because actually the raglan is a purl stitch. So it creates a very unique look, and I think that's actually what kind of visually pulled me to the pattern in the first place. The raglan looked a little bit different than I was used to. I didn't realize it was a purl stitch. This pattern has gone slow but pretty smooth except for 2 parts. So when I finished the German short row shaping at the back part at the beginning, I misread the final round and didn't realize, so it said to work the double stitch that happens when you turn your work and then move on to the next section to just start knitting in the round again. I read that thinking, okay, great, I worked the double stitch, and then I cut my yarn, I moved my stitches over to get back to the beginning of round marker because it said work from where it was originally placed, which was in kind of an awkward spot from all the German short row shaping. And then I started knitting, and I was like, okay, I think she's messed up something in the pattern because the numbers aren't matching. The number of stitches I had to move over to my needle before joining the yarn again was one stitch off, and then the back of round marker is in a weird place compared to where you actually need to start the pattern as written for working in the round again. If you have this pattern, this will make more sense. So I was very confused, and I went through the Ravelry. I'm like, okay, somebody must have mentioned that there's a mistake in here, and maybe I have caught something. But then I went back and read it later and realized it said to, on the last round of the German short row, work the double stitch, then work to the next double stitch. So keep going with your knits, work that second double stitch, then cut your yarn, and then move your stitches over. And if I had done that, my back of round or beginning of round marker would have ended up in exactly the correct place so that the rest of the instructions would have made sense. So all that means here is I have, I think, about 12 stitches in the middle front where I did not work an extra knit round. So I don't really notice it. Like I can't personally notice any issue that's come from that. Maybe it will be more evident once I finish the piece. And then also where I started knitting from originally, like where I joined my yarn, ended up adding a few extra stitches, I think about 6. And I don't see any actual issue that came from that. So I think it's fine. If it's not, well, I'm not going back to fix it. And then the only other thing that I messed up is on Saturday, I was working on this, and to keep track of the pattern repeats, because I need to do, I think, about 25 rounds of the repeats for the increases, I was just using a counter on my phone. So I press the plus sign when I finish a round, and then I know, am I on the increase round or the knit only round? And I think I forgot to hit the plus sign. So I was knitting quickly to finish a round before our friends came over for dinner on Saturday. And I think on that increase round, I forgot to press the plus to mark it down. And then when I picked it up at midnight to work on it before bed, I started knitting. It was like, oops, I was doing a knit only round, and I'm pretty sure I need to be on an increase round based on my counter app. So then I went back and did the increases. I tinked and then started over, but it didn't, and it just doesn't feel similar when you're on an increase round, like the stitch between seems off. Well, I felt like maybe I was on the wrong row, but kept going. It didn't really look incorrect in the somewhat darkness that I was knitting in. And then I realized yesterday I definitely did end up adding, so let's see if I can show this. I did end up adding an extra increase, which is super subtle. I barely notice it, but when I went to count my stitches today, I am definitely 2 stitches more, which means I did an extra increase round. I don't think it's a huge problem. I don't notice it, and if I am 2 stitches higher, I think for the size small, that's fine because it will be at the top, and I'm okay with it being a little bit looser than it's supposed to be. I also think my gauge might be slightly off here because, again, I cast it on a whim for vacation, therefore I did not gauge swatch, but I have been accurate to her. So I'm using the yarn recommended in the pattern, and I haven't had any issues with Suzanne Muller's gauge on other patterns yet. So I just sort of figured it would be fine. And I did measure, I think once I stretch this, it's in blocking, it's going to be fine. So I actually ended up finishing the additional increase rounds last night, and I'm at a point where I could actually try on my Freestyle shirt. So I thought I'd just pop back in so that we don't have to wait all the way to the next episode and just show this to you properly, because it was quite hard to show when I filmed. So I have put this on, and I think I'm really, really happy with it. This color is gorgeous. I love this green. And I think fit-wise, the raglans are hitting me at exactly the right point. So yeah, successful fit check, and I am really excited to continue with this now. I'm through all the increases. I'm just straight stockinette at this point, knitting in the round until I get to the folded hems, and then I will move on to the sleeves where I believe there's also folded hems, but yeah, it'll be a good mindless knit to continue with. So just wanted to share my progress and show you where I'm at. So since the last podcast episode, which I filmed, I guess, 2 weeks ago, that's all the stuff that I've been working on. I do still have my Braidy Loop cardigan. I think I did 2 extra rounds on it since I last filmed, but not worth even pulling out and sharing. So I still need to finish the rib bottom on that, cast off, and then get started on the sleeves, which now that we're into fall, I really want that piece. So I am going to start prioritizing that a bit more over the Stromboli tee. And then the other project that I have that I showed last time is my FancyPepitasSkirt test knit by Ann-Kathrin Stoll. I have not made any progress on that because the needles that I need are currently in my Braidy Loop. So I'm going to just try to finish that Braidy Loop cardigan. Maybe I'll even just sit down and do it tonight, actually. I'm going to try to finish the rib because I really, really want to start on the FancyPepitasSkirt because you all gave such amazing styling tips for that. So I think also the amount of people that said not to be afraid to mix black and brown was really reassuring, because I feel like I've always had in my mind that you shouldn't be mixing those 2 colors. And if I can mix black, that makes styling a lot easier because I have a lot of black, especially for tights and shoes. So I was really, really appreciative of all the styling comments. I think also just shoe recommendations, so a lot around knee-high boots or nice loafers, which I really want to get. And then I think for the colors, people also went back and went through all my old knits and ended up recommending stuff. So I think the Una tee came up from Irene Lynn that I've made, and actually I always forget that I even have that piece. So I think that would pair really well with the skirt. Also, my sweater number 8 that I said, definitely this sweater came up a lot as a piece to pair with. So I'm really excited to get that off my needles and start playing around with it. I've also bought some new tops recently that I think will go really nice. Like I bought a forest green dark long sleeve and also a brown long sleeve that I think will be enough contrast to pair nicely with it. The FancyPepitasSkirt isn't so much that I don't want to be working on it, it's just I need those needles. Braidy Loop, the body will get done, and then I'm going to move back over to that. The FancyPepitasSkirt I would actually really love to have done by the next episode, because also realistically, this Freestyle Shirt is a little bit similar to the Stromboli, where I'm not sure how much wear I'm really going to get out of it for the season anymore. However, this is such an easy knit, at least until I get to the finishing details. I think this has folded trim on the bottom and sleeves. But at the moment, it's a really easy knit. I love having just a stockinette project to work on. So I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap that one up, because I can maybe get a little bit of wear, especially if I pair a cardigan over it. Whereas I don't think with the Stromboli, it lends itself as well to like fall style and throwing a cardigan or a blazer over it. So like I said, I think short and sweet episode. I have 0 acquisitions. I am currently working on my fall planning, and I do have yarn that I want to buy, but I really just want to think all of that through and make sure that I'm buying yarn that I'm actually going to use right away. So I'll probably have a fairly big purchase coming up in the next few weeks, but at the moment, nothing new to share. So thank you so much for supporting my channel for the past year. Really exciting to have my 1-year anniversary here on Goodknits. And if you enjoy this content, please don't forget to like and comment, especially if you have any additional questions for me that you want me to answer in future episodes. And please go ahead and subscribe if you enjoy this content and you want to stick around. I post podcast episodes roughly every 2 to 3 weeks and sprinkle in additional content here and there as I have things to share. So if you missed it, I just recently posted my updated wear test video looking back at my spring summer knits, and that's a series where I reflect back on all my recent knits and how I've actually been wearing them, if I actually like them, what I would change. So really taking a critical eye to the pieces that I've made and how I can improve in the future. So that's always a great series, and I love seeing all the positive feedback on it. And I'm going to be doing my fall knitting video in the next week or two. So I am just trying to collect my thoughts on that, but really excited for what I have planned for this season. And definitely I will never get to it all, but a girl can dream. So yes, please stick around and I will see you in the next episode.